When you think of Earth and all the organisms on Earth, what is it's supporting environment, ecosystems, cities, we need to think about the water cycle. So let's see what we can learn today. And on top of that, I'll share how the water cycle can be affected by climate changes. So let's see if we can go from here. So here, the water cycle, there are 4 or 5 key parts to look into, and then we have a few more vocabulary words to include. So first of all, when you think of water, we need to realize that on Earth, the water is in 3 different states. One is a liquid state. We find liquid water in oceans, lakes, rivers. We can see water in the gas form. So that's we part of it's in the atmosphere. It can be also in uh, coming out of volcanoes. That's another example. And the third one is about ice. When water cools down, either in the winter or on mountain chains, we have solid water. So here we have an example of the cycle. Why do we say water cycle? It's because it's a big circle and it can come back to the beginning. And it's a circle that goes on over and over again. So let's see some vocabulary today. So the first one to keep in mind is that we have water all over the world. So that's the first thing. And the energy source creating the water cycle is the sun. Without the sun, we have no water cycle because the water will be in a solid form and nothing would grow. So the energy here, there's enough energy coming to Earth to take the water of the oceans, water from lakes, from different places. They take the water molecule, they excite them, and they get excited, and then they go from the liquid state into the vapor. So the vapor goes up into the sky. So evaporation happens from large bodies of water like oceans, but evaporation can also happen from lakes, for example. Perfect. As the water vapor goes up into the sky, it gets closer and closer to space. So what happens is the water molecules are cooling down. So they were all activated by the heat of the sun. They are slowing down. So what will happen is that you have water molecules that will get with another one to create little water droplets. If they're high enough, these liquid water droplets will become little ice crystals. So if you look in the sky and you see those thin white clouds high in the sky, so these are water crystals. And then if there's enough of those little good droplets, then they will start creating much bigger clouds. The clouds will take the droplets, create drops, and when they're big enough, they're going to start falling down towards the earth. So we have evaporation, then we go into the condensation to go from gas to liquid. And then what will happen is we'll have precipitation. So precipitations, they can happen in a liquid state, like rain, for example, but they can also fall down as a solid, like snowflakes, for example, or little ice pellets. So here we have what we call precipitation. So here from the water that came up, here from the ocean, condensed, now it's going to the ground. So here on the ground, we have water in different ways here. So if we have ice and snow, this can melt, and when it melts, it will create water, and the water will run off mountains here. So that's one thing here. So water runoff is very important. It's following the geography. It could be here along the plain here. We have surface runoff, and then the water starts going back to the ocean. So here we have a quicker cycle. However, there's a few things too, because sometimes that water that falls down will actually go into the ground. It's called infiltration. Another one, it could be seeping. The water seeping is getting into the ground, and through movement on the ground, we will have a flow of water. Now, the flow of water on the ground is very slow. So to go from a mountain to the ocean, it could take decades to centuries. So what will happen is some of that water in the ground could come up through the ground here. You could end up with surface spring water, and the water can actually go and fill a lake from under. That does happen. And eventually it goes to the ocean, completing the cycle. Some of that water, if there's fractures in the rocks, can move much faster, and then you can end up with caves with water underground. So this is the main cycle here. We have evaporation, condensation, precipitation, and then we have water runoff. So these are the main ones. But we have a few things that are interesting as well. There's another word here that is interesting. It's called evapotranspiration. What does that mean? That means that when you have a plant and the plant does photosynthesis, it takes water from the ground, it gets into the trunk of the tree or the plants. And when a tree has leaves, water will come out of the leaves. And that's why when you have jungles, you have a humid environment. It's the water that goes through the plant and it's coming out of the leaves and putting water vapor in the atmosphere. That's possible. We can also have evaporation from streams and lakes. That's also very important. So all of these working together gives us a chance to have that the water is always recycled. So it goes up and it flows down here, and then when it's back to the ocean, it will evaporate again. So if some of you would say, well, how come we have the oceans that are salty? So what happens is that when the water goes up, evaporates into the atmosphere, it is pure water. So this water that can easily dissolve other materials. So when it goes through the ground flow or the surface runoff, it dissolves a little bit of nutrients, chemicals, and what happens is that they bring that back to the ocean. But because the ocean, there's evaporation and only pure water goes out, over the millions of years, there's an input of different particles and different molecules and different ions. And the ocean, over the millions of years, gets saltier and saltier. If you were to take an ocean and you were to block it and you keep evaporating the water, I know there's a few places around the world, like the Dead Sea, where the salt concentration is very, very high. And the reason for that is that there's no influx of water. You just have evaporation. So the Dead Sea will keep on evaporating and therefore the salt content increasing. So there's a fun little piece of information.